Elena Carter's feet were killing her. 6 hours into her double shift at Bellissimo, Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurant, and the swelling in her ankles had gone from uncomfortable to unbearable. She paused by the server station, one hand pressed against the small of her aching back, the other resting instinctively on the barely visible curve of her stomach. 12 weeks. 3 months of secret terror and silent joy. 3 months of morning sickness hidden in the staff bathroom. 3 months of praying nobody would notice before she figured out how to tell them. Table 9 needs water refills. Marcus, the floor manager, snapped as he breezed past. His voice carried that edge it always did lately, sharp and impatient. And table 12 has been waiting 7 minutes for their appetizers. Move. Elena grabbed a water pitcher, ignoring the way her vision swam slightly. She'd barely eaten today. The smell of the kitchen's garlic and olive oil, usually comforting, now made her stomach turn. But she needed this job. Desperately. Especially now. The rent on her studio apartment in Queens had gone up again. Her mother's medical bills from last year's surgery were still sitting in collections. And now there was a baby coming. A baby she wanted with her whole heart, despite the terror. A baby whose father had no idea he was about to become one. She thought about Marco as she refilled water glasses at table 9. Her husband of 8 months, the man she'd married in a quiet courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses and no family. He thought she worked at a diner in Brooklyn. Safer that way, he'd said. Less attention. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you, Marco Santini. Even his name made her chest warm. They'd met when he came into the small cafe where she'd worked before Bellissimo. He'd ordered an espresso, black, and left. A $50 tip on a $3 coffee. When she'd chased him down to tell him he'd made a mistake, he'd smiled and said, "No mistake. Beautiful service deserves beautiful appreciation." 3 dates later, she was in love. 6 months later, they were married. He told her he worked in family business and construction management. She never pushed for details. Some part of her knew there were things Marco kept from her, shadows in his life he didn't want touching hers. But he was gentle with her, patient. He made her feel safe in a way she'd never felt before, and now she was carrying his child. Elena returned to the kitchen, picking up the appetizer plates for table 12. The calamari gleamed with oil. Her stomach lurched. She breathed through her mouth, carefully balancing the dishes, and pushed through the swinging door back into the dining room. Finally, the woman at table 12 said without looking up from her phone, "We've been waiting forever. My apologies, ma'am. Please enjoy." Elena set down the plates with practiced grace, despite the nausea climbing her throat. She made it through the next hour on autopilot. Smile, take orders, deliver food, clear plates, refill drinks. The mechanical routine that usually calmed her now felt like wading through concrete. Her body was changing in ways she couldn't control, couldn't hide much longer. At 8:15, Marcus called her into his office, a cramped room behind the kitchen that smelled like cigarettes and old paperwork. Elena's heart sank the moment she saw his expression. Cold. Evaluating. "Close the door," he said. She did, her hands suddenly trembling. "Is something wrong?" "Sit down, Elena." She sat in the plastic chair across from his desk, her pulse hammering in her ears. Through the thin walls, she could hear the kitchen staff shouting orders, the clatter of dishes, the normal chaos of Friday night service. Marcus opened a folder on his desk. "I've been reviewing staff performance metrics. Your numbers have dropped significantly over the past month. You're slower. You're making mistakes. Yesterday, you mixed up 2 orders. Last week, you called in sick twice. I had the flu. You've also been taking frequent bathroom breaks. 15-minute breaks, Elena. During dinner rush." Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry. I'll do better. I promise. That's what you said last month." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression not unkind, but final. "Look, you're a good server. You were, but lately, you're a liability. Customers are complaining. The kitchen staff is covering for you. I can't keep justifying your position." The room tilted. "Marcus, please. I need this job. I'm sorry, Elena. I really am." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. "This is 2 weeks severance. I'm being generous because you've been with us for 2 years. But I need your uniform by the end of tonight. 2 weeks severance. 14 days of rent. Maybe groceries if she was careful. And then nothing. No income. No health insurance. No way to pay for prenatal care or delivery or anything. The tears came before she could stop them, hot and fast and humiliating. "Please don't fire me," her voice cracked. "Please. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air. Marcus's expression shifted from professional distance to uncomfortable awareness. He glanced at her stomach, then quickly away. "I'm 12 weeks, Elena continued, desperation making her voice shake. "I haven't told anyone yet. I've been trying so hard to keep up, to not let it affect my work, but the morning sickness and the fatigue." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just need a few more weeks, just until I can find something else. Please." Marcus stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the alley. For a moment she thought maybe he'd reconsider. Maybe human decency would override business calculations. "That makes this easier then," he said finally, not looking at her. "Bellissimo has a reputation to maintain. We need staff who can handle the demands of fine dining. If you're pregnant, you'll only get slower, more unreliable. It's better to make a clean break now." "Better for who?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "For everyone." He turned back to her, his face set. "I'm sorry about your situation. I really am. But I have a restaurant to run." Elena stood on shaking legs. "You can't fire someone for being pregnant. That's illegal." "I'm not firing you for being pregnant." Marcus's voice went cold. "I'm firing you for poor performance. The pregnancy is just confirmation that this is the right decision." The distinction was meaningless. They both knew it, but he had lawyers and she had nothing. No savings for a legal battle. No proof that her performance issues were pregnancy-related rather than actual incompetence. "Please," she whispered one more time, hating the begging in her voice. "I need this job. My baby needs this job. I need you to clear out your locker and turn in your uniform." Marcus returned to his desk, already done with her. "Payroll will mail your final check and severance." Elena stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, her hand pressed protectively over her stomach. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't. "Elena, the uniform." She stumbled out of his office, past the kitchen, where her coworkers were too busy to notice her tears, down the narrow hallway to the staff lockers. Her hands shook so badly she could barely work the combination lock. Inside her locker, a photo of her and Marco from their wedding day, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing, a spare pair of shoes, a granola bar she'd been saving, the emergency $20 bill she kept hidden in her jacket pocket, $20, 2 weeks severance, and a baby on the way. Elena pulled out her phone, staring at Marco's name in her contacts. She should call him, tell him everything. About the pregnancy, about losing her job, about the terror climbing her throat. But Marco had been stressed lately. Tense. He'd had multiple late-night phone calls in Italian, his voice low and urgent. When she'd asked if everything was okay, he'd kissed her forehead and said, "Business. Nothing for you to worry about." She didn't want to be another problem for him to solve. Didn't want to be a burden. Elena changed out of her uniform in the bathroom, pulling on her jeans and sweater with numb fingers. The jeans were already tight around her waist. In another few weeks, they wouldn't fit at all. She'd need maternity clothes, prenatal vitamins, doctor's appointments. All of it cost money she didn't have. She walked out through the kitchen, past the dining room, where well-dressed couples ate $100 meals without thinking twice about the cost. Past Marcus, who didn't look up from his computer. Past the life she'd been building, one minimum wage hour at a time. The November air hit her face like a slap, cold and sharp and real. Elena stood on the sidewalk outside Bellissimo, her thin jacket inadequate against the wind, and let herself break. She cried for the job she'd lost, for the baby growing inside her who deserved better than a mother who couldn't even keep employment, for the fear that was a physical weight in her chest, for the future that had seemed manageable this morning and now felt impossible. "Please don't fire me. I'm pregnant." She sobbed into her hands, alone on a Manhattan street corner. The words she'd said to Marcus, but quieter now. A prayer to a universe that wasn't listening. "Please, I'm pregnant." She didn't see the man standing 30 feet away in the shadow of a parked SUV. Didn't notice the way his entire body had gone, still at her words. Didn't know that Marco Santini, her gentle husband who worked in family business, had been meeting with his underboss in the private room at the back of Bellissimo when he'd heard raised voices from the manager's office. Didn't know that Marco had moved quietly down the hallway, drawn by a voice that sounded familiar. His wife's voice. His Elena, who was supposed to be working at a diner in Brooklyn, not here at Bellissimo. The restaurant his family had owned for 30 years. The restaurant where he conducted business every Friday night. Didn't know that Marco had stood outside Marcus's office door, listening to every word of her firing. Every sob. Every desperate plea. Didn't know that when she said, "I'm pregnant," the earth had shifted under his feet. Now Marco watched his wife cry on the sidewalk, watched her cradle her stomach with protective hands, watched her break under a weight she'd been carrying alone, and something inside him went very, very cold. Elena was pregnant. With his child. His child. And someone had just made her sob in the street. Marco pulled out his phone, pressing a single contact. His call was answered before the first ring finished. "Boss? Get me everything on Marcus DeLuca," Marco said quietly. His voice was ice over steel. "The floor manager at Bellissimo. Everything. Where he banks, where he lives, who he owes money to. I want it in an hour. Done. Everything okay?" "No." Marco watched Elena wipe her eyes, straighten her shoulders, and start walking toward the subway. Still so strong, still fighting, even when the world was crushing her. "But it will be." He ended the call. Made another. "Angelo, clear my schedule for tomorrow. I need to have a conversation with restaurant management." "What kind of conversation?" Marco's jaw tightened as he watched Elena disappear down the subway stairs. "The kind where they learn what happens when they hurt my family." He stood in the cold November night, rage and love and fierce protectiveness burning through him in equal measure. Elena thought she was alone, thought she had to carry this burden by herself, thought her problems were too small for him to care about. She was wrong. Marco Santini hadn't built his organization by letting people disrespect what was his. And Elena, his wife, the mother of his unborn child, was his. Not in a possessive way that diminished her, but in the way that meant her battles were his battles. Her pain was his pain. Her tears were a declaration of war. Marcus DeLuca had made a catastrophic mistake tonight. He just didn't know it yet. By morning, he would. Elena's studio apartment in Queens felt smaller than usual. The single room with its kitchenette and Murphy bed, the bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. She'd called it cozy when she moved in 2 years ago. Tonight, it felt like a cage. She sat on the edge of her bed, still in her jacket, staring at the eviction notice that had been slipped under her door while she was at work. 30 days to pay the back rent she owed, or get out. $1,800 she didn't have. Hadn't had even before losing her job tonight. Her phone buzzed. "Marco. Everything okay, amore? You usually text when your shift ends." Elena stared at his name on the screen. She should tell him. Right now. About the baby, about the job, about all of it. But the words stuck in her throat, thick and impossible. "Just tired," she typed back. "Long shift. Going to bed early. Love you. Love you more. Sweet dreams." She set down the phone and pressed her hands to her face. Tomorrow. She'd tell him tomorrow. Tonight, she just needed to breathe. To think. To figure out a plan that didn't involve completely falling apart. But sleep wouldn't come. Elena lay in the dark, one hand on her stomach, and tried to imagine a future where everything worked out, where she found another job quickly, where the baby was healthy, where Marco didn't look at her with disappointment when he learned how badly she'd failed at taking care of herself. The images wouldn't form. All she could see was Marcus's cold expression. It's better to make a clean break now. Better for him, maybe. For Elena and her baby, a disaster. At 2 a.m., she finally fell into fitful sleep, dreams full of unpaid bills and crying babies and judgment in the eyes of people who should have helped her. She didn't know that 8 blocks away, in a downtown office that officially didn't exist, Marco was reviewing files on Marcus DeLuca with the focused intensity of a surgeon planning an operation. Marcus DeLuca, 34, floor manager at Bellissimo for 6 years. Good performance reviews, no criminal record, married, 2 kids in private school. Mortgage on a brownstone in Park Slope that was just slightly beyond what his salary should afford. Interesting. Angelo Russo, Marco's underboss, pointed at a section of the report. He's got gambling debts, $50,000 to a bookie in Jersey, been making minimum payments for 8 months. Marco studied the numbers. Who else knows about this? Just the bookie. DeLuca's been keeping it quiet. Probably why he needs the job so bad. Can't afford any risks to his income. And yet he fires a pregnant woman for being too slow. Marco's voice was soft, dangerous. Fires my pregnant wife. Angelo's eyebrows rose. Elena's pregnant? 3 months. I found out tonight. Marco closed the folder. She didn't tell me. Tried to handle everything herself. Work through morning sickness, hide the exhaustion, until some middle management piece of nothing decided she was a liability and threw her out. What do you want done? Marco leaned back in his chair thinking. Elena wouldn't want violence. Wouldn't want him to solve problems the way his world usually solved them. She'd married Marco thinking he was a contractor, a legitimate businessman. She didn't know about the family business, about the network of restaurants and construction companies and shipping operations that moved more than just legal goods. She didn't know that the Santini family had controlled Lower Manhattan's waterfront for 40 years. That Marco's word was law in 6 neighborhoods. That men twice his age called him boss and meant it. She didn't know any of it. And he'd planned to keep it that way, to give her a clean life, separate from the darkness of his world. But now that world would serve her, protect her, make sure she never sobbed on a street corner again. I want DeLuca to understand what he's lost, Marco said finally. Not his life, not his family, but his peace, his security, the comfortable little bubble where he gets to decide who deserves dignity and who doesn't. How? His gambling debts, buy them, quietly, then let him know the terms have changed. Angelo smiled. And Bellissimo? Bellissimo is family property, has been for 30 years. I think it's time I took a more active role in management decisions. Marco's expression went cold. Starting with reviewing the hiring and firing practices. The staff doesn't know you're connected to the restaurant. They're about to learn. Marco stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city. Somewhere out there, Elena was sleeping. Or trying to, probably crying. Definitely afraid, thinking she was alone. By tomorrow afternoon, Marcus DeLuca would understand the mistake he'd made. By tomorrow evening, Elena would have her job back if she wanted it, or a better offer if she didn't. And by tomorrow night, Marco would sit his wife down and tell her 3 things. That he knew about the baby, that she never had to hide struggles from him again, and that the life he'd been protecting her from was now her shield. Whether she was ready for that conversation or not, because Marco Santini had exactly 2 rules in life. Protect the family, punish those who threaten it. Marcus DeLuca had broken Rule 2. Now he'd learn about Rule 1. Elena woke to her phone buzzing at 7:30 in the morning. Too early for Saturday. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through impossible math. Rent plus utilities plus groceries plus prenatal care minus income equals disaster. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Manhattan area code. Hello? Her voice was rough from crying. Mrs. Santini? A woman's voice, professional and warm. This is Dr. Patricia Moretti from Manhattan Women's Health. I have an opening this morning at 9, if you're available for your first prenatal appointment. Elena sat up, confused. I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong number. I haven't made an appointment yet. I don't even have insurance right now. Your coverage through Santini Family Benefits is excellent. Full coverage for prenatal care, delivery, and postnatal. No copays, no deductibles. Papers rustled in the background. I have a note here that your husband Marco called our service last night and requested we get you in as soon as possible. Said you've been managing some difficult symptoms. Elena's mind spun. Santini Family Benefits? Marco had never mentioned family insurance. He'd always paid for things in cash, told her his family business was private, handled differently. Mrs. Santini, are you there? Yes, I'm sorry. I'm just surprised. Marco called you last night? Around 3 a.m., actually. Very concerned about making sure you had immediate care. Dr. Moretti's voice softened. Congratulations, by the way. First baby? Yes. Elena's hand went to her stomach. How did he? I mean, we haven't really discussed. Husbands have their ways of figuring things out. A knowing smile in the doctor's voice. Can we expect you at 9? The office is on Park Avenue. Suite 412. Park Avenue. The kind of medical care Elena had only read about. The kind that came with leather chairs and waiting rooms and doctors who remembered your name. I'll be there, Elena heard herself say. After she hung up, Elena stared at her phone. Marco knew. Somehow, he knew about the baby. And instead of being angry that she'd hidden it, instead of waiting for her to tell him, he'd arranged medical care in the middle of the night, How had he found out? Her phone buzzed again. This time Marco. Amore? I hope I didn't wake you. There's a car waiting downstairs. Black SUV. Driver's name is Tony. He'll take you to your appointment. Elena walked to her window, peeling back the curtain. Sure enough, a gleaming black SUV sat at the curb. A man in a dark suit leaned against it, scanning the street with the kind of alertness that suggested military training. Marco, what's going on? How do you know about, we'll talk tonight? His voice was gentle but firm. Right now, I need you to go to this appointment. Make sure you and our baby are healthy. That's all that matters. Our baby. He'd said it with such certainty, such ownership. Not questioning, not accusatory, just accepting. Marco, I lost my job yesterday. I can't afford. You don't need to afford anything. I take care of my family. A pause. You are my family, Elena. You and the baby. Nothing else matters more than that. Do you understand? Tears burned her eyes. I wanted to tell you. I was just scared and, I know. We'll talk about all of it tonight. But right now, Tony is waiting. Doctor. Moretti is excellent. She delivered my cousin's children. You're in good hands. After they hung up, Elena got dressed in a daze. She'd planned to spend today job hunting, panicking, maybe calling her mother in Florida and admitting how badly she'd failed at being an adult. Instead, she was being driven to Park Avenue by a man who looked like he could kill someone with his bare hands. Tony opened the SUV door for her, his expression professionally neutral. Mrs. Santini, good morning. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Elena sank into seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. As they pulled into traffic, Elena studied Tony in the rearview mirror. Have you worked for Marco long? 10 years, ma'am. In construction? Tony's eyes met hers in the mirror. A flicker of something, amusement maybe, or assessment, among other things. What other things? Whatever the boss needs. The answer, that wasn't an answer. Elena settled back against the leather, watching Manhattan slide past. Boutiques and coffee shops giving way to the gleaming towers of the Upper East Side. This wasn't her world. This was the world of women who didn't worry about rent, who had drivers and insurance and husbands who called private doctors at 3 a.m. This was apparently Marco's world, a world he'd kept carefully hidden from her. Dr. Moretti's office was everything Elena had imagined and more. Marble floors, fresh flowers, a receptionist who smiled like she genuinely cared. 2 other pregnant women sat in the waiting room, both wearing clothes that screamed money. One was scrolling through her phone, a massive diamond catching light on her left hand. The other was reading a prenatal yoga book, her designer bag casually tossed on the chair beside her. Elena smoothed down her Target clearance sweater and approached the desk. Elena Santini, she said quietly. I have a 9 o'clock appointment. The receptionist's smile brightened. Mrs. Santini. Yes, we've been expecting you. Doctor. Moretti cleared her schedule to see you this morning. She handed Elena a tablet. Just some routine paperwork. Your insurance information is already in our system. The paperwork asked questions Elena didn't know how to answer. Father's medical history? Marco had never mentioned his family's health. Emergency contact other than spouse? She had no one. Her mother was barely functional. Her father long gone. She was completing the forms when the door opened, and a woman in her 50s entered, elegant and professional in a white coat over a silk blouse. Elena? I'm Dr. Moretti. Come on back. The examination room was warm, soothing colors and soft lighting. Doctor. Moretti gestured to the examination table, then pulled up a stool. First, let me say congratulations. Marco speaks very highly of you. Elena blinked. You know Marco. Our families have known each other for many years. He's a good man. Dr. Moretti opened a file on her computer. Now, tell me what you've been experiencing. Any morning sickness, fatigue, unusual symptoms? For the next 20 minutes. Elena answered questions with a relief that felt like exhaling after holding her breath for weeks. Yes, terrible morning sickness. Yes, exhausted constantly. Yes, emotional, crying at commercials. No bleeding or severe cramping. Dr. Moretti listened, made notes, and offered the kind of reassurance that came from decades of experience. Everything you're describing is completely normal for the first trimester. The exhaustion should improve after week 14, usually. The nausea, we can help with. She wrote a prescription. This is safe during pregnancy. Take it in the morning with food. Then came the ultrasound. Elena lay back on the examination table, her shirt pulled up to expose her still mostly flat stomach. The gel was cold, the wand pressed against her skin. And then, from the machine's speaker, a sound that made Elena's breath catch. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Fast and strong and impossibly real. "There's your baby," Dr. Moretti said, turning the screen so Elena could see. A tiny shape, almost bean-like, moving on the grainy black and white image. Heartbeat is perfect, 158 beats per minute, measuring right at 12 weeks, 2 days. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at that tiny flickering movement on the screen. Her baby, real, alive. Not just an abstract concept of pregnancy, but an actual person. Her and Marco's child. The tears came hot and fast. "It's overwhelming, isn't it?" Dr. Moretti handed her a tissue, her voice kind. "But your baby is healthy. Strong heartbeat, good size. Everything looks exactly as it should." She printed out ultrasound photos, 3 copies. One for you, one for Marco, one for the baby book. Elena clutched the images as she left the office, Tony appearing immediately to escort her back to the SUV. She stared at the grainy photo the entire ride home. Proof. Evidence. This was happening. She was going to be a mother. "Mrs. Santini?" Tony's voice broke through her thoughts. "The boss asked me to take you shopping if you need anything. Groceries, clothes, whatever you need. I'm fine. Thank you." "With respect, ma'am." He was very clear. "Whatever you need." Elena looked up at Tony's reflection in the rearview mirror. His expression was respectful but unyielding. "Tony, what exactly does Marco do? And don't say construction. I'm not stupid. I know there's something else." Tony was quiet for a long moment. "That's a conversation you should have with him, Mrs. Santini. Not my place. But you've known him for 10 years. You must know. I know he's the best man I've ever worked for. I know he'd walk through fire for the people he loves. And I know that anyone who hurts his family answers to him directly." Tony's eyes met hers in the mirror. "That's all you need to know right now." It wasn't all she needed to know, but it was all she'd get. Tony dropped her back at her Queens apartment at 11. "I'll be back at 6 to bring you to dinner with the boss. I can take the subway." 6 o'clock, Mrs. Santini. Not a suggestion. Elena climbed the stairs to her apartment, exhausted despite the morning's early hour. She'd just unlocked her door when her phone rang. Unknown number again. "Hello? Elena Santini?" A male voice, professional but warm. "Yes? This is James Patterson from Riverside Property Management. I'm calling about your apartment at Queens Plaza Towers." Elena's stomach sank. The eviction notice. They were probably calling to confirm she couldn't pay. "I know I'm behind on rent," she started. "But if you could just give me... Actually, Mrs. Santini, I'm calling to inform you that your account has been paid in full. All back rent cleared, and the next 6 months have been prepaid." Elena sat down hard on her couch. "What?" "Your account is current, and fully paid through May of next year. Additionally, we've received authorization to handle any future maintenance requests with priority service." Papers rustled. "It looks like the payment came from Santini Property Holdings this morning." "I don't understand." "Neither do I, ma'am, but your account shows a 0 balance. You're all set." After he hung up, Elena stared at her phone. Her rent. Paid. 6 months in advance. By a company called Santini Property Holdings. Marco, who worked in construction and family business. Marco, who had insurance that covered Park Avenue doctors. Marco, who could pay $9,000 in rent with a phone call. Marco, who was apparently not a struggling contractor like she'd assumed. Her phone rang again. This time, she knew what was coming. "Mrs. Santini, this is Valley Medical Center, calling about your mother's account. I know I'm behind on payments." "No, ma'am. Quite the opposite. Your mother's remaining balance has been paid in full. Additionally, we've received payment for her prescriptions for the next 12 months. Elena's mother's medical bills. $4,000 that had been haunting her for a year. Gone. Paid." "Who paid it?" Elena asked, though she already knew. The payment came from Santini Family Trust. When the calls finally stopped, Elena had a list. Her rent, paid. Her mother's medical debt, cleared. The credit card she'd maxed out buying groceries, mysteriously showing a 0 balance. Even her ancient car that she'd been terrified would die before she could afford repairs, scheduled for full service at a Manhattan mechanic who specialized in luxury vehicles. Everything, every source of stress that had been crushing her for months, gone, handled, fixed, by a husband who'd somehow learned she was pregnant and had spent the night systematically eliminating every problem in her life. Elena sat in her apartment, surrounded by evidence that her life was nothing like she'd thought it was, and tried to decide if she was grateful or terrified. Maybe both. Marcus DeLuca arrived at Bellissimo at noon on Saturday to handle inventory. The restaurant was closed for lunch. Wouldn't open until 5 for dinner service. Just him and the kitchen prep crew, the quiet that came before the chaos. He was reviewing liquor orders in his office when his phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus DeLuca? Yes. Who's this? This is Anthony Rivera from Cardinal Financial Services. I'm calling about your outstanding debt with Jersey Shore Sportsbook. Marcus's blood went cold. The gambling debt. The $50,000 he'd been desperately paying down in minimum installments, hoping his wife never found out. How did this financial services company even know about it? I don't discuss my private finances with... Your debt has been purchased by our firm, Mr. DeLuca. Effective immediately. We own your obligation. You can't just buy someone's debt without... We can, and we did. It's all perfectly legal. The original creditor was happy to sell at a discount. Papers shuffled. Which brings us to repayment terms. The full balance of $50,000 is now due within 30 days. Marcus's vision tunneled. 30 days? I don't have $50,000. That's why I was making payments. Then I suggest you find it. Because if you don't, we begin seizing assets. Your car first, then we'll put a lien on your house. A pause. Your kids go to Brookside Academy, don't they? Private school in Park Slope? Very expensive. Would be a shame if you couldn't afford tuition next semester. You can't threaten my children. I'm not threatening anyone, Mr. DeLuca. I'm explaining the consequences of defaulting on a legal debt. You have 30 days. Payment instructions will be emailed to you within the hour. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, his hands shaking. 50,000 in 30 days. Impossible. He made 60,000 a year. Had a mortgage, car payments, school tuition. His wife Sarah didn't work, stayed home with their 2 kids. They were already stretched thin. How the hell had some financial company even known about his gambling debt? Those bookies operated in cash, off the books. There was no paper trail, unless someone had told them. Unless someone had specifically sought out his debt and purchased it. But who would do that? Marcus tried calling the number back. Disconnected. He Googled Cardinal Financial Services. No results. No website. No business listings. Nothing. Ghost company. Someone was coming after him. Someone with resources and knowledge and very specific intent. His phone buzzed. Email from Cardinal Financial. Payment instructions and a detailed list of all his assets that could be seized if he defaulted. At the bottom, a single line that made his stomach drop. You should be more careful about who you fire, Mr. DeLuca. Some people have family who don't forget. Elena. Oh God. Elena Santini. Marcus pulled up his files with shaking hands. Elena Carter. He'd hired her under her maiden name 2 years ago, but he'd seen her payroll information change 8 months ago when she'd gotten married. Name update to Elena Santini. Santini. The name was everywhere in Lower Manhattan if you knew where to look. Construction companies, shipping businesses, restaurants. Old money, old power. The kind of family that didn't advertise but didn't need to because everyone already knew. Marcus had fired a Santini. And apparently, the family had noticed. He grabbed his coat and left Bellissimo, his mind racing. 30 days, 50,000. No way to get it. Unless he could convince Elena Santini to call off whoever was doing this. Apologize. Explain he hadn't known she was connected. Beg if necessary. He drove to the address he had on file for her. Queens Plaza Towers. Cheap apartments. Nothing fancy. Maybe she wasn't that connected. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. He was. Parking when a black SUV pulled up. Not just any SUV. A Mercedes G-Wagon with tinted windows and plates that screamed money and power. A man got out, 6'2", built like a tank, moving with military precision. The man opened the back door. Elena Santini stepped out. She looked different from yesterday. Not the exhausted, crying server begging for her job. This Elena wore new clothes, held herself with quiet dignity, and was followed by the kind of protection detail that only very important people needed. The man said something to her. She nodded and entered the building. Marcus sat in his car, watching. The security detail waited by the SUV, scanning the street with professional awareness. After 15 minutes, Elena came back out carrying a bag. She got into the SUV. It drove away. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another email from Cardinal Financial. I see you've located Mrs. Santini. I strongly suggest you don't approach her. She's been through enough. This matter is between you and us now. 29 days remaining. Marcus threw his phone on the passenger seat. They were watching him, tracking him. Whoever they were, he drove home in a daze. Sarah was in the kitchen making lunch, their 2 kids watching cartoons in the living room. Normal Saturday afternoon. Except nothing was normal anymore. Hey, honey, Sarah said, smiling. You're home early. Marcus looked at his wife, his children, the life he'd built on credit and luck and barely managing to stay ahead of his mistakes. I need to tell you something, he said. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Elena sat across from Marco at a private table in the back of Romano's, a restaurant she'd never heard of but that clearly knew him well. The staff had greeted him by name. The owner had personally welcomed them, and their table was positioned so that no one could approach without being seen. Marco wore a dark suit, his hair still damp from a shower, and looked at her with an intensity that made her skin warm, and her heart race, and her mind scream with questions. You've had quite a day, he said gently. I've had quite a day. Elena set down her water glass, her hand trembling slightly. Marco, I don't even know where to start. Start with the baby. His eyes dropped to her stomach, then back to her face. Our baby. How did you know? Marco was quiet for a moment, debating how much to tell her. I was at Bellissimo last night. In the back room, handling some business. I heard voices from the manager's office. Heard you crying. Elena's face went pale. You were there? I heard everything, amore. The firing, the begging, you saying you were pregnant. His jaw tightened. I heard that bastard tell you it was better to make a clean break. You own Bellissimo. Not a question. The pieces were clicking together. That's why everyone knew your name. That's your family business. My family owns it, yes, along with 30 other properties in Manhattan. Marco reached across the table, taking her hand. But I didn't know you worked there. You told me you were at a diner in Brooklyn, because you told me to keep my job quiet. Said it was safer if people didn't know about me. Elena's voice cracked. I thought you were embarrassed of me, that you didn't want your family knowing you married a waitress. Elena. Marco's grip tightened. I wasn't embarrassed. I was protecting you. My world, my family's business, it's complicated. I kept you separate because I wanted you to have a clean life, a normal life, away from everything. What everything? Marco was saved from answering by the arrival of their waiter with appetizers Elena hadn't ordered. Apparently, Marco had pre-arranged the entire meal. After the waiter left, Marco leaned forward. My family has been in New York for 4 generations. We started with construction. Legitimate business. But over the years, we expanded. Restaurants, real estate, shipping, unions. Not all of it is, strictly speaking, legal. Elena's stomach tightened. You're saying I'm saying my family has influence, connections, power that comes from controlling infrastructure and commerce. Marco's eyes never left hers. I'm saying that people who hurt my family discover very quickly that there are consequences. The phone calls, my rent being paid, my mom's medical bills. That was you. That was me. The debt collector who called Marcus DeLuca. Was that you too? Marco smiled, cold and satisfied. The manager who fired you? Marcus has some outstanding gambling debts. $50,000 to some very unforgiving people. Those people were happy to sell the debt to one of my companies. Now Marcus has 30 days to pay or he loses everything. Elena pulled her hand back. Marco, you can't ruin someone's life because he fired me. He has kids. A family. So do you. A family. Me. Our baby. Marco's voice went hard. He made you cry on a street corner, Elena. He called you a liability while you were pregnant with my child. He deserves everything that's coming to him. But his children don't deserve to lose their home. His children won't lose anything. I'm not a monster. Marco softened slightly. I'm teaching Marcus a lesson in consequences. In 30 days, if he comes to me with an apology and a plan to do better, I'll restructure his debt into something manageable. But first, he needs to understand what powerlessness feels like. Elena stared at her husband, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the gentle contractor who brought her flowers and kissed her forehead, but someone harder, colder, capable of systematically destroying a man's life with a few phone calls. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm your husband, the father of your child, the man who loves you more than anything in this world." Marco reached for her hand again. "And I'm also someone who doesn't let people hurt what's mine." "Both things are true, Elena. You lied to me about who you are, what you do. I protected you. There's a difference." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "But you're right. I should have told you the truth. Should have trusted that you could handle it. I'm sorry." Elena wanted to be angry, wanted to feel betrayed. But sitting here, well-fed for the first time in weeks, no longer drowning in debt, carrying his child with access to the best medical care money could buy, she mostly felt confused. "I don't know how to do this," she said finally. "How to be married to someone I don't actually know. Then let me show you. Let me be honest about everything." Marco squeezed her hand. "No more secrets. No more protection that looks like lies. You want to know what I do? Who I am? I'll tell you all of it. All of it. All of it." They talked for 2 hours. Marco explained his family's history, the businesses legitimate and otherwise. He told her about the network of loyalty and obligation that held his organization together. He explained that yes, technically, people called him boss. And yes, technically, that made him sound like something out of a movie. But the reality was much more boring. Paperwork and phone calls and negotiations. Business. Just business. That occasionally operated outside legal boundaries. "We don't hurt innocent people," Marco said firmly. "We don't deal in drugs or trafficking or anything that victimizes the vulnerable. We move goods. We facilitate commerce. We provide services that people want but can't get through official channels. And yes, sometimes we bend rules. But we're not violent criminals, Elena. We're businessmen. Businessmen who buy people's gambling debts to teach them lessons. Businessmen who protect their families." Marco's eyes were intense. "That manager fired you while you were pregnant because you were becoming inconvenient. He made a business decision that hurt you. So I made a business decision that hurts him. That's not revenge. That's justice," Elena wanted to argue. But the exhaustion of the past weeks, the relief of having support, the overwhelming knowledge that she was carrying a baby who would need stability and security, it all pressed down on her. "I need time to process this," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. But know this." Marco stood, coming around to her side of the table. He knelt beside her chair, his hands on her knees, looking up at her with absolute sincerity. "I love you, Elena. Nothing about my world changes that. And I'm going to take care of you and our baby. That's not negotiable. You can be angry at me for lying. You can be confused about who I am. But you cannot doubt that I will protect you both with everything I have." Elena looked down at this man, her husband, kneeling in an expensive restaurant like a supplicant before a queen. This man who'd spent the night eliminating every problem in her life. This man whose world was so much bigger and more dangerous than she'd imagined. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know. That's okay." Marco pressed a kiss to her hand. "But you're not alone. Not anymore. Not ever again." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Santini, this is Angelo Russo. I work with your husband. He asked me to reach out about employment opportunities. We have several positions available in our legitimate businesses. Restaurant management, property administration, event coordination. All above board, all well paid. If you're interested, I'd love to discuss options. You deserve better than being treated like you're disposable." Elena showed Marco the text. "Did you arrange this? I told Angelo you needed options, but the decision is yours." Marco stood, helping her to her feet. "You can work if you want to. You can stay home if you prefer. You can go back to school. Whatever you choose, we'll make it work. But you're never going to sob on a street corner again because someone like Marcus DeLuca decided you weren't worth keeping." Elena leaned into him, letting him support her weight. "This is crazy." "Welcome to my world, amore." Marco kissed the top of her head. "It's complicated and messy and sometimes morally gray. But it's real. And it's ours now. Yours, mine, and our babies. As they left the restaurant, Tony waiting by the SUV, Elena caught sight of their reflection in the glass door, Marco's arm around her shoulders, protective and possessive, her hand resting on her stomach. They looked like any other couple, but they weren't. They were something else entirely. Something powerful, something untouchable, something that Marcus DeLuca was about to learn was very, very dangerous to cross. Sunday morning, Marcus DeLuca sat in his living room while Sarah packed bags for the kids. They were going to her mother's in Connecticut. For how long, she didn't know, until Marcus figured out how to handle the $50,000 debt he'd hidden from her for a year. "I can't believe you did this," Sarah said for the 10th time, angry and scared and trying not to cry in front of their children. "I can't believe you gambled away our savings and didn't tell me." "I know. I'm sorry. I'll fix it." "How? How are you going to fix $50,000 in 30 days? Marcus had no answer. He'd spent Saturday night researching Santini family businesses. The deeper he dug, the more terrified he became. This wasn't some small-time operation. The Santinis controlled significant portions of Manhattan's infrastructure: construction unions, shipping contracts, waste management, restaurants, and he'd fired one of their own. Sarah loaded the kids into her minivan. Before she drove away, she turned to Marcus. "Fix this. Whatever you have to do. Because if we lose this house, if our kids have to leave their school, I don't know if I can forgive you." After they left, Marcus sat in the silence of his empty house and made a decision. He called Cardinal Financial Services. Got voicemail. Left a message. "This is Marcus DeLuca. I know you're connected to the Santini family. I know this is about Elena. I was wrong to fire her. I was wrong about a lot of things. I'm asking for a meeting, please. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't destroy my family over my mistake." 2 hours later, his phone rang. "Mr. DeLuca, this is Angelo Russo. I work with Marco Santini. He's willing to meet with you tomorrow, 2 p.m., at the Bellissimo office. Come alone. Bring nothing but an apology. I'll be there, thank you. Don't thank me yet. You have no idea what you're walking into." The line went dead. Marcus spent Sunday night practicing what he'd say. How to apologize to a man whose pregnant wife he'd thrown out like garbage. How to beg for mercy from someone who clearly didn't need anything Marcus could offer. He thought about Elena Santini. Young, scared, trying so hard to keep working through exhaustion and morning sickness. How she'd begged, how she'd cried, how he'd felt nothing but irritation at her weakness. Now he understood what real powerlessness felt like. The crushing weight of consequences you couldn't escape. The terror of losing everything because someone more powerful had decided you weren't worth keeping. The exact thing he'd done to her. Tomorrow, Marcus would face Marco Santini, and he'd learn whether begging for mercy worked any better for him than it had for Elena. Somehow, he doubted it. Monday morning arrived with November rain. Elena stood at the window of the apartment Marco had insisted she stay in last night. Not her cramped Queens studio, but a penthouse in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. His apartment, though he'd been careful to say ours when he'd shown her the second bedroom he'd already started, converting into a nursery. "I've been working on it for 3 days, he'd said, showing her the soft gray paint, the white crib still in its box, the rocking chair positioned by the window. "Since I found out." 3 days. He'd known for 3 days and had immediately started building a life for their child. While she'd been panicking about rent and wondering how to afford prenatal vitamins, Marco had been creating a nursery. Her phone buzzed. Dr. Moretti's office, confirming her next appointment and reminding her to take her prenatal vitamins. The prescription Marco had filled yesterday, along with the expensive supplements and the ginger tea for morning sickness, and the pregnancy books he'd stacked on the nightstand. Elena picked up one of the books. What to Expect When You're Expecting. A bookmark already placed at week 12. Marco had been reading ahead. She heard the apartment door open. Marco's voice, low and controlled, speaking Italian. Then Angelo's reply, equally quiet. They were in the living room, probably reviewing whatever business needed handling today, including, Elena knew, the meeting with Marcus DeLuca. She found them at the dining table, papers spread out, both men in dark suits that made them look like exactly what they were: powerful, dangerous, in control. Angelo stood when he saw her. "Mrs. Santini, good morning. Please, call me Elena." She poured coffee, her hands steadier than yesterday. "What time is Marcus coming?" Marco's expression went flat. 2:00. You don't need to be there. I want to be. Elena. He fired me, Marco. I was there when he made me beg. I should be there when he does the same. She met her husband's eyes. Unless you're planning to hurt him. Then no, I don't want to see that. I'm not going to hurt him. Marco stood, crossing to her. But I am going to make sure he understands what he did. That won't be pleasant. Good. The word surprised her, the steel in her own voice. He deserves to be uncomfortable. He deserves to know what powerless feels like. Angelo smiled slightly. She's definitely a Santini. I'm a Carter, Elena corrected. I just happen to be married to a Santini. Same thing now. Angelo gathered his papers. Boss, I'll make sure the office is ready. 2:00, Bellissimo back room. After he left, Marco pulled Elena close. You're sure you want to be there? Really sure? Because once you see that side of my world, you can't unsee it. I've already seen it. You dismantled someone's life in a weekend. Elena looked up at him. I'm not naive enough to think that's where it ends. If I'm going to be part of your world, part of this family, I need to understand all of it. You're already part of this family. You married me. You're carrying my child. His hand settled on her stomach. Nothing changes that. Then let me be there. Let me see who you really are when you're being the boss, not just my husband. Marco studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. 2:00. But if I tell you to leave, you leave. No arguments. No arguments. Elena agreed. Marcus DeLuca arrived at Bellissimo at 1:55 p.m., his shirt already damp with nervous sweat despite the cold rain. The restaurant was closed on Mondays, the dining room dark and empty, only one light visible in the back, guiding him like a lighthouse toward his judgment. Angelo Russo met him at the door. The man was smaller than Marcus expected, dressed impeccably, with the kind of calm that suggested absolute confidence in his ability to handle any situation. Mr. DeLuca. Right on time. Angelo's smile didn't reach his eyes. Follow me. They walked through the restaurant Marcus had managed for 6 years, past the bar where he'd trained new servers, past the kitchen where he'd argued with chefs about timing, past his own office, where he'd fired Elena 3 days ago. 3 days. How had his entire life collapsed in 3 days? The back room was small, meant for private dining or business meetings. A single table with chairs, 2 men waiting. One Marcus didn't recognize. Broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that barely contained his build, standing by the door with his arms crossed. The other sat at the head of the table, reading through papers with focused intensity. Dark hair, maybe 35, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's car. He didn't look up when Marcus entered. Sit, Angelo said, gesturing to the chair directly across from the seated man. Marcus sat. His hands were shaking. He clasped them in his lap. The man at the head of the table finally looked up. Dark eyes, unreadable expression, the kind of stillness that came from complete self-control. Marcus DeLuca, the man said quietly. I'm Marco Santini. You fired my wife. Marcus's mouth went dry. I didn't know she was your wife. I swear I had no idea. Does that matter? Marco set down his papers. Would it have been acceptable to fire her if she'd been married to someone less powerful? If she had no one to protect her? No. Marcus stumbled over his words. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was under pressure, trying to manage staff, and I made a bad decision. You made several bad decisions. Marco pulled out a file. You fired a pregnant woman for being too slow. You called her a liability. You made her beg for her job while she cried, then threw her out anyway. Each word landed like a physical blow. Marcus wanted to defend himself, to explain the pressures of restaurant management, the impossible balancing act of staff and customers and profit margins. But looking at Marco's face, he knew none of that mattered. I'm sorry, Marcus said again. Truly, if I could take it back. But you can't. Marco leaned forward slightly. Which brings us to why you're here. You asked for this meeting. You said you'd do whatever it takes. So tell me, Marcus, what exactly are you willing to do? Anything. I'll apologize to Elena. Publicly if you want. I'll write a letter, make a statement. She doesn't want your apology. A new voice, female, from the doorway. Marcus turned. Elena stood there, wearing clothes he'd never seen her in. Expensive, well-fitted. She looked different. Not the exhausted server begging for mercy, but someone who belonged in this room, with these people. Elena. Marcus stood. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have. Sit down, Marco said quietly. Marcus sat. Elena walked to Marco's side, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder, a gesture of unity, of choosing her place. Then she looked at Marcus with eyes that held no forgiveness. I worked for you for 2 years, she said. I never missed a shift until I got morning sickness. I never complained. I learned every regular's name and order. I covered for other servers when they were sick. I did my job with pride. You did. You were a good employee, and the moment I became inconvenient, you threw me away. Her voice was steady, controlled. You didn't ask if I was okay, didn't offer accommodations, didn't treat me like a human being with a life and problems. You saw a liability, and you eliminated it. Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. You're right. I'm sorry. Do you know what I did after you fired me? Elena's hand went to her stomach. I stood on the street and cried. I went home and tried to figure out how to tell my husband I'd failed. Failed at keeping a job, failed at being responsible, failed at taking care of our baby before it was even born. Elena, Marco said gently. Warning or support? Marcus couldn't tell. No. Elena's eyes never left Marcus. He needs to hear this. I spent that entire night thinking I was alone. That I'd have to handle everything by myself because I was too ashamed to ask for help. That's what you did to me, Marcus. You made me feel like nothing. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Marcus felt tears burning his own eyes. You didn't mean to make me feel worthless? Or you didn't mean for there to be consequences? Elena's voice went cold. Because those are very different things. Marco stood, walking around the table. He stopped beside Marcus's chair, looking down with an expression that made Marcus's skin crawl. Here's what happens next, Marco said quietly. Your debt is now $60,000. I've added $10,000 in fees and interest. You have 60 days to pay it. $60,000. I can't possibly. Let me finish. Marco's voice cut through Marcus's panic. 60 days. If you can't pay, which we both know you can't, you come work for me. Marcus blinked. Work for you? I own this restaurant. I own 4 others. All of them need managers who understand what happens when you treat employees like they're disposable. Marco circled back to his chair. You'll work as floor manager at our Staten Island location. Same salary you make now. But every dollar you earn goes toward paying off your debt until it's cleared. That'll take years. Then you should have thought of that before you made my wife cry. Marcus tried to process this. You're not going to destroy me? I'm giving you a choice. Marco sat down. You can refuse this offer, walk away, try to run from the debt, but if you do, I will come after every asset you have. Your house, your car, your wife's inheritance from her grandmother that you think I don't know about. I will take everything legal, perfectly legal, and I will leave you with nothing. Marcus felt sick. That's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. No. Elena's voice made him look at her. A choice is what you gave me. Work while pregnant and exhausted or lose everything. Now you get the same choice. Work to pay off your debt or lose everything. Seems fair to me. The coldness in her voice, the absolute absence of sympathy. Marcus finally understood. She wasn't here for closure. She was here to watch him face consequences. I'll take the job, Marcus said quietly. Good. Marco pulled out a contract. You start next Monday. Angela will handle the details. Your family keeps their house. Your kids stay in their school. Your wife doesn't need to know the full extent of your stupidity. But you work for me until that debt is paid. And if I hear one word about you treating employees badly, if I hear about anyone crying in your restaurant because you made them feel worthless, the deal is off. Marcus signed, his hand shaking so badly the signature was barely legible. One more thing, Marco said, as Marcus stood to leave. Every year on the anniversary of the day you fired Elena, you make a donation to the Hospitality Workers Relief Fund. $5,000. For the next 20 years. A reminder that the people who serve food aren't invisible. They're human beings with families and struggles, and they deserve respect. 20 years of donations. That's another 100,000. Consider it penance. Marco's smile was ice. Or consider it the price of getting to keep your comfortable life, while the woman you fired rebuilds hers. Marcus looked at Elena one last time. I am sorry. For whatever that's worth. It's worth nothing, Elena said simply. But you working for my husband, paying off your debt, donating to help other workers, that's worth something. That's the beginning of actually understanding what you did. Angelo escorted Marcus out. The door closed behind them. The room fell silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Marco turned to Elena. "How do you feel?" "I feel." She searched for the word. "Powerful." "Is that wrong?" "No." Marco pulled her into his arms. "That's exactly right. You should feel powerful. You are powerful." Elena leaned against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "He's going to hate working for you." "Good. He should be uncomfortable. He should remember every single day what it costs to treat people like they don't matter." Marco kissed the top of her head. "But his family keeps their home. His kids stay in their school." "I'm not cruel, Elena. I'm just making sure the lesson sticks. Your world is complicated." "It is. But you're part of it now. Are you okay with that?" Elena thought about the past 3 days. The terror of losing her job. The relief of Marco's support. The confusion of learning who he really was. The satisfaction of watching Marcus DeLuca face consequences. "I'm okay with it," she said finally. "As long as we're honest with each other. No more secrets. No more protection that looks like lies. No more secrets." Marco agreed. "You want to know something about the business? I tell you? You want to be involved in decisions. You're involved. You're not just my wife, Elena. You're my partner." "Even the illegal stuff?" Marco pulled back to look at her face. "Even that. Though I'd prefer you stay away from the more questionable operations. Not because I don't trust you, but because if anything ever goes wrong, I want you and the baby protected." "That's fair." Elena reached up, touching his face. "I love you. Even though you're apparently some kind of crime boss." "Business leader with flexible ethics," Marco corrected with a small smile. "And I love you too. Even though you're apparently fierce enough to watch a man beg without flinching. I learned from the best." They stood in the empty restaurant, rain drumming against the roof, and Elena thought about how much her life had changed in 72 hours. Lost her job. Found out her husband was something out of a movie. Discovered she was stronger than she'd thought. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, we go home. You rest. I handle business." Marco checked his watch. "And tonight, we have dinner with my mother. She's very excited to meet you officially and learn about the baby." Elena's stomach dropped. "Your mother?" "Marco, I've met her exactly once, at our wedding, and it was for 30 seconds. She'll love you. She already does." Marco guided her toward the door. "She's been after me for years to settle down, have children, give her grandchildren to spoil. You've made her very happy. What does she know about what you do?" "Everything. She ran the family businesses after my father died until I was old enough to take over." Marco's expression softened. "She's the one who taught me that power isn't about fear. It's about loyalty and family and taking care of your own. So it runs in the family. Apparently it runs in yours too now." That evening, Elena stood in front of Marco's bathroom mirror trying to calm her nerves. She wore a dress Marco had bought her, soft blue that accommodated her slight bump, paired with shoes that didn't hurt her swollen feet. She looked like someone who belonged in a penthouse, having dinner with a matriarch of organized crime. She looked like someone she didn't quite recognize. "You're beautiful," Marco said from the doorway. "And she's going to love you." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." They took a car to Brooklyn, to a brownstone that looked like any other on the tree-lined street. Tony drove. Angelo rode shotgun. Both men alert and professional. Elena was starting to understand that Marco never went anywhere without security. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "The protection detail?" "Always. Part of the life." Marco took her hand. "I know it's strange. You'll get used to it." "Will I?" "You'll have to. Once the baby comes, you'll both have security. Non-negotiable." Elena thought about raising a child in this world. Bodyguards and drivers and secrets. Then she thought about the alternative, raising a child alone. Struggling with bills and inadequate healthcare and no support system. This was better. Complicated, but better. Rosa Santini opened the door before they knocked. She was in her early 60s, elegant in simple black pants and a silk blouse. Her dark hair streaked with silver. She took one look at Elena and broke into a smile. "Elena, finally!" She pulled Elena into a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and garlic. "My son keeps you hidden away like a secret. Now I understand why. He wanted you all to himself." "Mama," Marco said, kissing her cheek. "Let her breathe." "I'm fine," Elena said, surprised by the warmth. "Thank you for having me." Haven't you? This is your family now." Rosa ushered them inside. The brownstone was beautiful, traditional Italian decor, mixed with modern comfort. Family photos covered every surface. "Come, sit. I made bracioli. Marco says you've been having morning sickness. Food will help." They sat at a dining table that could have seated 12, just the three of them. Rosa served homemade pasta, braised beef, roasted vegetables, bread that was still warm from the oven. "Eat," she commanded. "You're eating for two now." Elena tried a bite of the braciole. It was the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. Her morning sickness had made everything unappetizing. But this, somehow, she could eat. "It's amazing," she said honestly. Rosa beamed. "Marco told me about the baby. A grandchild. Finally." She reached across the table, taking Elena's hand. "You've made an old woman very happy." "You're not old, Mama," Marco said. "I'm old enough to want grandbabies. And now I get one." Rosa turned to Elena. "Do you know if it's a boy or girl yet?" "Too early to tell. Maybe at the next ultrasound. Either way, I'll spoil them terribly." Rosa's expression grew serious. "Marco also told me what happened. That manager who fired you. Marco's handling it?" "He's handling it," Elena confirmed. "Good." Rosa's eyes went hard for just a moment. "No one treats a Santini woman that way. Family protects family. You understand this, yes?" "I'm starting to." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Then Rosa said, "I know this world must seem strange to you. Marco's world, our world. When I married his father, I was like you, innocent, didn't understand the past, business. Thought I could stay separate from it." "What changed?" Elena asked. "I realized separation wasn't protection, it was isolation." Rosa set down her fork. "I had a choice. Stay ignorant and alone, or learn the business and stand beside my husband. I chose to stand beside him. Best decision I ever made. Even with the risks, especially with the risks, because then I could help manage them, could protect my children, could be a partner, not just a wife." Rosa looked between Elena and Marco. "My son kept you separate because he loves you, wanted to protect you. But now you know the truth. Now you have the same choice I had. Stay ignorant or get involved," Elena said quietly. "Stay powerless or claim your power," Rosa corrected. "In this family, the women aren't decorations. We're partners. If you're going to be Marco's wife, the mother of his children, you need to understand that." Elena felt Marco's hand find hers under the table, supportive, not controlling, letting her make her own choice. "I want to understand," Elena said. "All of it. I want to be a partner, not someone who needs protecting." Rosa smiled. "Good. Then starting tomorrow, you come to me. I teach you about the businesses, the legitimate ones first. How the restaurants work, the property holdings, the investments. You learn how this family makes money legally. And the other stuff? The other stuff. You learn if you need to. But first, you understand the foundation. How we built this empire. How we maintain it. How we protect it." Rosa's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Knowledge is power, Elena. In our world, more than most." After dinner, Rosa brought out photo albums, baby pictures of Marco, family gatherings, weddings and christenings spanning generations. She told stories about Marco's father, how they'd met, how he'd built the business from nothing. "He was a good man," Rosa said, touching a photo of a handsome man in his 40s. "Not perfect, made mistakes, but he protected his family, took care of his people. That's what matters." Elena looked at the photos, at the life Rosa had built, at the legacy she'd passed to her son. This wasn't just crime or business or power. It was family, loyalty, survival. "I want our baby to know these stories," Elena said, "to understand where they come from." "They will." Rosa closed the album. "And they'll grow up knowing they're protected, that they come from strength, that their family doesn't abandon them when things get hard." The words hit Elena in the chest. Her own family had been broken, scattered, barely functional. Her mother in Florida, her father gone since she was 10, no siblings, no support system. But now she had this, the Santinis, a family that protected its own with terrifying efficiency. "Thank you," Elena said to Rosa, "for welcoming me, for treating me like I belong. You do belong, you married my son." You're carrying my grandchild. Rosa squeezed her hand. You're a Santini now. That means something. That means everything. 2 weeks later, Marcus DeLuca started his new position at the Staten Island restaurant. He arrived at 6 a.m., as instructed, to meet with Angelo Russo, who would be overseeing his work. The rules are simple, Angelo said, walking Marcus through the restaurant. You manage staff with respect. You treat every employee like they're someone's family member. Because they are. And if I hear one complaint, one instance of someone feeling devalued or threatened or disposable, you're done. I understand. I hope you do. Angelo opened the office that would be Marcus's. Small, windowless, nothing like the comfortable space he'd had at Bellissimo. Your debt is tracked on this spreadsheet. Every paycheck, every dollar you earn, goes toward paying it down. You can see your progress, see how much you owe, see how long it'll take. Marcus looked at the numbers. 60,000. His salary minus living expenses meant he'd be paying it off for the next 4 years. 4 years of working for the man whose wife he'd fired. 4 years of being reminded every single day of his mistake. This is going to be hell, Marcus muttered. No, Angelo corrected. Hell would be losing your house, your family, your entire life. This is mercy. You're getting to keep everything that matters while learning a lesson. Don't confuse the two. Marcus's first day was brutal. The staff was immediately suspicious of him, having been warned by Angelo that the new manager was there as punishment, not privilege. They tested him, pushed back on his directives, watched for any sign that he'd revert to the same behavior that got him here. By the end of the week, Marcus was exhausted and humbled and beginning to understand what Elena must have felt. The powerlessness of being watched constantly, judged constantly, knowing one mistake could cost everything. He called Sarah every night, told her the job was fine, that they'd manage, that everything would work out. He didn't tell her about the debt-tracking spreadsheet, or the way Angelo dropped by daily to review complaints, or how one of the servers had cried last month about a previous manager's treatment, and Marcus had spent an hour apologizing and promising she'd never feel that way again. He was learning, slowly, painfully, but learning. Elena stood in the nursery of their Manhattan penthouse, hands on her stomach, feeling the first gentle flutters of movement. 18 weeks. The baby was real, active, growing stronger every day. What are you thinking? Marco's voice from the doorway. That this is nothing like I planned. Elena turned to face him. 6 months ago, I was a waitress living paycheck to paycheck, hiding from my own problems. Now I'm here. With you. With this. She gestured at the completed nursery, the life they were building. Regrets? No. Elena walked to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Adjustments, but not regrets. She'd spent the past 2 weeks learning the family business from Rosa. How the restaurants operated, which properties generated passive income, which investments were long-term versus short-term. She'd sat in on meetings, watched negotiations, started to understand the legitimate empire the Santinis had built. She'd also started to understand the other side, the shipments that came in off the books, the cash that moved through businesses without official records, the favors traded and debts called in, the network of loyalty that operated parallel to law. It wasn't what she'd imagined her life would be, but it was real, and it was hers. Rosa wants me to start coming to the restaurants, Elena said, learning operations from the inside. She says I should understand how the business really works, not just the spreadsheets. Do you want to? I think so. I need something to do besides wait for the baby. I need to feel useful. Marco kissed her forehead. You're always useful, but if you want to work, we'll make it happen. Just promise me you'll rest when you need to. The baby comes first. The baby always comes first. Elena felt another flutter of movement. Marco, there's something else I've been thinking about. What? Marcus. His debt. 4 years seems like a long time. Marco's expression went carefully neutral. He earned it. I know. But what if we gave him a way to reduce it? Not forgive it, just reduce it. If he completes training programs, takes management classes, proves he's actually changed, we cut time off his sentence. Why would we do that? Elena thought about what Rosa had said. About power, not being about fear, but about loyalty and family and taking care of your own. Because the point isn't torture, it's teaching. If he learns the lesson faster, proves he's different, then keeping him locked into 4 years is just cruelty. She met Marco's eyes. And we're not cruel. We're just making sure justice happens. Marco studied her face for a long moment, then smiled. You sound like my mother. I'm learning from the best. I'll talk to Angelo. If Marcus shows genuine change, we'll consider it. Marco's hand joined hers on her stomach. You're going to be a good mother. Firm but fair. Strong but compassionate. I'm learning that from you. They stood in the nursery as afternoon light painted everything gold. Outside, Manhattan hummed with millions of lives intersecting, struggling, surviving. Inside, they built something different. Something powerful and protected and fiercely loyal. I love you, Elena said. All of you. The gentle husband and the ruthless boss. Both of them. I love you too. The sweet waitress and the fierce woman who watched a man beg without flinching. Marco kissed her. We're going to be good at this. The business, the family, all of it. Promise? Promise. 6 months later, Elena gave birth to a daughter, Sophia Rosa Santini, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's determination. Rosa held her granddaughter in the hospital room and cried. She's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Marco sat beside Elena's bed, holding her hand, looking at his daughter with an expression of awe and terror. I have no idea what I'm doing. Neither do I. Elena was exhausted, exhilarated, overwhelmed. We'll figure it out together. The Santini family arrived throughout the day. Angelo brought flowers and a promise to be the best uncle. Tony brought a teddy bear bigger than the baby. Rosa brought an entire lasagna because new mothers need to eat. And at 4 p.m, Marcus DeLuca knocked on the hospital room door. Elena looked at Marco, questioning. Marco nodded. Come in, Elena called. Marcus entered carrying a small wrapped gift. He looked different from 6 months ago. Thinner, tired, but something else too. Humbler, more aware. I'm sorry to intrude, he said. I heard about the baby. I wanted to bring something. He set the gift on the table. And to say congratulations. Thank you, Elena said. She could be gracious now, 6 months and a lifetime removed from that night on the street corner. Marcus looked at the baby in Rosa's arms. She's beautiful. She is. Elena glanced at Marco, then back to Marcus. How's the job? Difficult. But good. I'm learning. Marcus's voice was quiet. I've taken 3 management courses, finished training on conflict resolution and employee relations. Angelo says I'm improving. That's good to hear. I wanted to apologize again. I know I've said it before. But seeing you here, with your family, with your daughter. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. I'm glad I didn't succeed in breaking you. I'm glad you're here. Living this life. You deserve all of it. Elena could see the sincerity in his face, the genuine remorse, the change that came from being forced to confront consequences. I appreciate that, she said. And Marcus? I talked to Marco and Angelo. The management courses, the training, the effort you're putting in, it's being noticed. Every program you complete, we're reducing your debt by 3 months. If you keep this up, you could be done in 2 years instead of 4. Marcus's eyes widened. Really? Really? But only if you keep proving you've changed. 1 complaint, 1 instance of treating someone badly, the deal's off. I understand. Thank you. Truly. Marcus looked at Marco. Thank you both. After he left, Rosa handed baby Sophia to Marco. You're raising that girl right, she said to Elena. Firm but fair. Justice, not revenge. I learned from you. And I learned from my mother, who learned from hers. Rosa smiled. That's how it works. We pass down strength, generation to generation. Your daughter will learn from you. She'll grow up knowing what real power looks like. Elena watched Marco hold their daughter, saw the way his entire expression softened, the way he cradled her like she was made of glass. What does real power look like? She asked. Like this. Rosa gestured at the room. Family, loyalty, protection, taking care of your own while holding others accountable, making sure the people who wrong you face consequences, but also giving them paths to redemption. She touched Sophia's tiny hand. Real power is knowing when to be ruthless and when to be merciful, and teaching our children the difference. Exactly. That night, after everyone had left, and it was just the 3 of them, Elena, Marco, and Sophia, They sat in the quiet hospital room watching their daughter sleep. "She's going to grow up in such a different world than I did," Elena said softly. "She's going to grow up protected, loved, strong." Marco's hand found hers, and she's going to know that her mother was fierce enough to stand on a street corner crying, then powerful enough to rebuild her entire life. With help, with partnership. There's a difference. Marco looked at her, his eyes full of love and respect. "I didn't save you, Elena. I just made sure you had the resources to save yourself, and to make sure Marcus DeLuca learned what consequences feel like. That too." Elena laughed quietly, careful not to wake the baby. 6 months ago, she'd been sobbing on a Manhattan sidewalk, fired and pregnant and terrified. Tonight, she lay in a private hospital room, her daughter sleeping beside her, her husband holding her hand, and her mother-in-law's lasagna waiting at home. She'd lost a job, but she'd gained a family, a purpose, and an understanding of her own strength. "Thank you," she said to Marco. "For what?" "For hearing me that night, for not letting it go, for showing me I was never as powerless as I felt. You were never powerless, you just didn't know it yet." Marco leaned over, kissing her gently. "Now you do." Sophia made a small sound in her sleep. Both parents froze, watching, waiting. But she settled back into peaceful breathing. "She's perfect," Elena whispered. "She's a Santini," Marco said with a smile. She was born perfect. And in that moment, in that room, Elena understood what Rosa had meant about power. It wasn't about fear or control or revenge. It was about this: family, protection, the fierce love that made you capable of anything. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, but she'd learned it, and she'd make sure her daughter never forgot it. 1 year later, Bellissimo hosted a private celebration. The staff gathered in the dining room after closing, dressed in their best, surrounded by food and wine and laughter. Angelo stood at the head of the room, raising his glass. "I want to thank everyone for an incredible year. This restaurant has thrived because of all of you. Your hard work, your dedication, your heart." The staff applauded. Among them, Marcus DeLuca stood in the back, his debt now down to 18 months, his management style completely transformed. "I also want to recognize someone who's made a significant impact," Angelo continued. "Marcus DeLuca has completed 8 training programs this year. He's mentored 3 new managers. And most importantly, we've had 0 employee complaints under his leadership. More applause." Marcus looked surprised, uncomfortable with the attention. "Marcus, come up here." Marcus walked to the front, his face red. Angelo pulled out a document. "Because of your progress, Marco and Elena Santini have agreed to reduce your remaining debt to 1 year. You've proven that people can change. That accountability and consequences can lead to real growth." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say thank you and keep doing the work." Angelo clapped him on the shoulder. "You've earned this." In the back of the room, Elena watched with Sophia on her hip. The baby was grabbing for everything, babbling happily, completely unaware of the significance of the moment. Marco stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "You were right," he said quietly. "Mercy was the right choice." "Mercy with accountability," Elena corrected. "He had to earn it." "He did. And now he's going to finish strong." Elena watched Marcus accept congratulations from the staff, saw the genuine gratitude in his face, saw the change that had come from being held responsible while being given a path forward. "Our daughter's going to grow up seeing this," she said. "This is what she'll think is normal. Power used to hold people accountable, but also to give them chances to grow. That's a good normal to grow up with." They left early, Sophia getting fussy and needing sleep. Tony drove them home through Manhattan streets, Angelo riding shotgun. The security that was now so routine, Elena barely noticed it. At home, Marco put Sophia to bed while Elena stood at the window overlooking Central Park. She thought about that night a year ago. The fear, the desperation, the certainty that her life was falling apart. She thought about Marcus's face tonight, the gratitude and relief. She thought about the nursery down the hall where her daughter slept, protected and loved. And she thought about the woman she'd become, not just Marco's wife or Sophia's mother, but Elena Santini, a woman who understood power and wielded it with purpose, who'd learned that strength wasn't about never falling, but about who stood beside you when you did. Marco joined her at the window, pulling her close. "What are you thinking?" he asked. That I'm grateful. For all of it, even the hard parts. Elena leaned into him. That night Marcus fired me. I thought my life was over. But it was actually just beginning. You found out you were stronger than you knew. I found out I wasn't alone. She turned to face him. I found out that asking for help isn't weakness, that accepting support isn't failure, that being part of a family means letting them fight for you sometimes, and fighting for them in return. Always. They stood in the fight. Quiet apartment, their daughter sleeping, their future stretching ahead with all its complications and challenges and fierce protective love. Elena had started as a waitress who'd lost everything. She'd become a wife who understood power, a mother who would teach her daughter about strength, a Santini who protected family with everything she had. And somewhere across the city, Marcus DeLuca was learning the same lesson Elena had learned, that the people who seem powerless might have families who would burn the world down for them, that consequences were real, that change was possible, that mercy and accountability weren't opposites, but partners. The city never knew the full story, never knew that a pregnant waitress sobbing on a street corner had sparked a transformation that rippled through multiple lives. They just saw a successful restaurant, a happy family, a man who'd learned to be a better manager. They didn't know about the war that had been fought in boardrooms and back offices, the debt that had been purchased, the lesson that had been taught with surgical precision. They didn't know that Marco Santini had heard his wife crying and had decided that some wrongs needed righting, no matter the cost. They didn't know that Elena Santini had found her strength not by being saved, but by being supported while she saved herself. But Marco knew. Elena knew. And every employee who worked in a Santini restaurant knew. You treat people with dignity, or you face the consequences. You protect family, always. And you never, ever make a Santini woman cry, because someone is always listening, and they have the power to change everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.